Welcome to the Women in Finance and Investment Networks platform. Today, in our Women in Finance and Investment Spotlight series, we have with us Tania Swanepoel, ESG Advisor at African Infrastructure Investment Management. Tania, she has over 20 years of broad-based environmental experience and she was at the Environmental Resources Management, ERM, for over 11 years before joining the AIIM. She has served on the board of directors at ERM Southern Africa from 2012 to 2018. Her years of experience in both the impact assessment and planning and contaminated land arenas provides her with a strong technical background in broad environmental, social, health, and safety best practices, combined with a keen understanding of the regulatory framework in South Africa. And today, she has joined us to share her insights from a private equity investor's perspective on investment and ESG, where we will be discussing about how investors are anticipating, measuring, and managing their approach to ESG. Tania, you are welcome on our platform, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so for our audience, I would say environmental, social, governance, ESG investment or sustainable investment, socially responsible investment, impact investment, moral investment, all these are some of the terms that are being used more or less to define the practice of incorporating ESG factors in investment decisions. Now, these factors are of increasing interest for our institutional investors and other market players. However, institutional investors may vary in their approach to considering ESG factors for investment decisions, with different types of strategies, data sets, and methods they use to integrate ESG factors in their decision making. So coming to you, Tania, we have seen that the integration of ESG consideration in investment decisions is becoming more and more of a common practice among institutional investors. According to you, where do you think this increasing importance of ESG in investment decisions is coming from?
Yeah, well, I think there's a far greater awareness about ESG risks and how they can affect business performance. You have organizations like the UNPRI that have been actively engaging the industry and working hard in this space for quite a few years now. I mean, they started with like 100 signatures in 2006. Oh, I'm so sorry. And now in June, they passed 4,000 signatories. So there's this, and then there's also this growing body of evidence debunking the myth that ESG, responsible investment, impact investing equals lower returns. In fact, the opposite is true. By managing your material, environmental, and social risks and identifying opportunities to create value, you result in a more resilient and more profitable and ultimately more sustainable business. So I think that kind of awareness has definitely grown in the last few years.
Okay, then why do you think it is now that ESG is gaining so much attention from investors and institutions? Like, what are the aspects and components that are making ESG prevalent and unavoidable at this point in time?
Yeah, so I mean, just at the beginning of this week, the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change just released the first part of their sixth assessment report. And the UN General Secretary said it's a code red for humanity and talked about the alarm bells being deafening. So it's hard to ignore like obvious increases in extreme weather events, flooding, fires raging, and the dire social and economic costs these have. there are also lots of courageous young people raising awareness about the effects of climate change, investors working together, for proxy votes, for instance, to force companies to develop concrete plans around achieving net zero. And here we are, talking remotely in the midst still of a global pandemic. And that's highlighted social inequalities. So, it's kind of hard to avoid. Hopefully, the concepts such as shared value and building back better will see much more capital flowing towards good and achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. But there's an undeniable urgency, I think, around ESG issues. At the moment.
I see. And what are some of the strategies that are being used for the integration of ESG criteria in investment portfolio? And also, how relevant are these different strategies?
So I think the best way to answer this is to kind of keep it close to home and talk about how we integrate ESG into our investment process and how we manage our portfolio at Old Mutual Alternative Investments, and more specifically at AIIM. And for us, the approach is pretty hands-on, given the nature of our business. You'll often hear us talking about boots on the ground. So asset managers work quite closely with portfolio company management teams. We have representation on boards. We sit on ESG subcommittees. So it's a very kind of hands-on approach. But the overall structure and framework for integrating ESG into our investment lifecycle is via a environmental and social management system, or ESMS. And this kind of lays out all our policies and our procedures around how we integrate it into the investment process, from originating a deal through due diligence, transition, ongoing management, and then at the end, realization or exit. And I think maybe the two key areas would be around due diligence and ongoing asset management. So in the due diligence phase, it's all about identifying the risk and opportunities and evaluating the business and making sure environmental and social conditions are factored into the investment decision, and that they're accounted for in financial terms. So they are accounted for in the financial model before you make the decision to invest. And then the outcome of the due diligence process is what we call an environmental social action plan. And this plan outlines what the items are to tackle as you enter the operational phase of the business, or the ongoing management phase of the business, to drive delivery. And it also becomes a tool for tracking progress and improvements along the way. And then ongoing management, when you're looking at the portfolio, it's about identifying the ESG considerations that are material to that business, and then balancing that with the data gathering requirements that are important to us as investors and important to our limited partners. For example, we spoke earlier about climate change, and for us, it was about we had to quickly evaluate which assets face physical risks or transitional risks, and what the magnitude of those risks are, and then drill down into focusing on those assets that had high risk, and what strategies need to be developed and managed to manage it going forward. So yeah, it's a long answer, but it's a complicated process.
Yeah, very detailed. It's great. It's amazing. My next question to you, do you think there are investment characteristics that has to be considered when evaluating ESG for investment decision making?
I think that depends on what the ESG considerations are. So, are they out and out showstoppers? So, where you're dealing with extremely sensitive habitat or negatively impacting vulnerable groups or indigenous people. So it can be a fatal flaw in that sense. And then if that isn't the case, if you're dealing with medium or high risk that remain, can they be mitigated? So are they properly understood? Have they been adequately costed and incorporated into the financial model, which we spoke about earlier? And then does this opportunity then still look attractive? And then on the flip side of that, because I've been talking about risk quite a bit, what are the positive outcomes that can be enhanced, and are your expectations as an investor aligned with the portfolio company?
Okay. Then here, I think a very crucial question is, how do investors measure ESG? Are there tools that institutional investors use in making ESG-related investment decisions?
Yeah, so there are a myriad of ESG rating tools and systems, but because of the nature of our particular business, the decision-making process is more based on your due diligence process, which I spoke about earlier. And in that case, we'll either do it in-house, or for most of our big infrastructure projects, it's leaning on external consultants to undertake the due diligence, and then making sure they have the right skill set to undertake the work, identify the material ESG issues that the business may face, at the time or going into the future. So I think, for us, it's less about the tools, except when you get to managing data. So if you're measuring ESG, we use a theory of change approach. So it's kind of looking at what are the inputs, what are the outputs you're looking at, what are the outcomes, and ultimately what your impacts are, and then working backwards to decide what are the indicators that we need to gather data on to get to where we want to be. And tracking those indicators. So using online data management systems, and being able to manage that data and then analyze it and aggregate it and report. I've said that, but it's not a seamless or easy process. I'm sure you're very aware of that.
True. Very true, and I would agree. My next question to you, in the context of fundraising, if we are to compare investors' focus in considering ESG, let's say a decade ago and now, what are the major changes in the institutional investors' conversations and considering ESG?
Yeah, so I think consideration of ESG factors has definitely evolved from perhaps not giving them too much consideration at all previously, to seriously factoring them into conversations around fundraising. So as a GP, our limited partners critically evaluating our capacity to manage ESG considerations. And then also there's kind of increased expectations around data and reporting requirements. So it's important now to have data to back up whatever you're claiming, especially when you're trying to demonstrate impact. And if you're able to demonstrate that you have good processes in place around identifying and managing material risks, that you're actively engaging and transforming on important issues like diversity, transformation in the South African context, for instance, is very important, gender equity, and other opportunities, and you're able to gather data, manage that data, and report. And if you're able to do that well, you're definitely at an advantage when it comes to raising capital.
Cool. That has been really insightful, Tania. I would like to also ask you, you are an ESG professional. That's okay. So Tania, you are an ESG professional. What pushed you or what motivated you to believe in and to pursue your career in this field?
Well, it was definitely not a job description when I started my career way back when. We won't say when, but I've been fortunate enough to gain experience and develop, a skill set which fits well with what I do and what I'm expected to do. And then I think just the influence and the encouragement of my professional network, which, what you're doing is key in creating that kind of environment and network, and then family. And I continue to pursue it because you can really on the ground see real difference. And, working with our portfolio companies and seeing the difference they make or the difference our investments are making. It's a privilege. It's a privilege to witness.
Powerful, powerful. My last question to you, Tania. What will be your one piece of advice that you would like to give to the women at a younger stage of their career who are aspiring to be the leaders of tomorrow?
So it's always difficult when you say one piece of advice, but what I mentioned before around building a supportive network amongst women in this industry is very important. So well done on that. And then I guess my advice is, this has been shared by many wise and strong women before me. But really, it's about, taking up space, owning your own voice, and realizing your perspective is unique. So not to be timid about sharing that. Wow,
that was amazing. Thank you so much, Tania, for this discussion. And as you rightly said, ESG has become a lot more relevant now than it was a decade ago. And I think such discussions are extremely valuable. And indeed, it's been a pleasure to have you, one powerful woman in this ESG space on our platform. And I am very positive that such insights coming from you, a woman leader, like I always say, a woman leader, will definitely motivate and inspire the young women to such roles. So thank you once again.
Well, hope so. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the work that you're doing. I think it's so needed, and you'll see a difference. You'll reap the rewards, as they say.
Thank you so much. And also to our audience, thank you so much for watching till the end. And if you've enjoyed this interview or you have any questions regarding the subject, please feel free to let us know by using the comment section at the bottom of the video. Until then, let's keep making it happen.